So my job is to either introduce you to an opportunity that you might not know exists, or take the opportunity that you have in front of you and maximize it, right? How do I make it better? How do I tighten it? How do I make sure you're protected? Um, Both, like I said, from a liability standpoint or financially as well.
Welcome to the Master the Media podcast. I'm your host, Amy Gorin, and I have a very special guest with us today, Blair Taylor, who is the owner of Taylor Talent Services, where he's an agent for honestly some of the most impressive doctor and healthcare professional names out there. So, welcome, Blair.
Thank you, Amy. Nice to see you.
You too. It's so fun to have you on the
I know.
podcast.
This is
And
great. I'm excited to be here. We have a lot to talk about.
yeah, and so today we're talking about something that I feel like healthcare professionals get zero education on, which is when would you need an agent? So I'm gonna let Blair give his intro before we dive into that topic.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. So first of all, I have been a talent agent for about 28 years, and I started out working with one of the biggest talent agencies in the country, primarily in the commercial space, right? And from there, I had an opportunity about maybe, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago, where a client of mine called me up and she's like, listen, I have a friend of mine that's being approached by Dr. Phil to be a guest on his show at the time. And he was a plastic surgeon. His name was Dr. Andrew Orden. And so he needed some assistance just in terms of what an appearance would look like as a guest on Dr. Phil. And so through that relationship and through meeting Dr. Orden, I became friendly with the folks at Dr. Phil's production company. They ended up creating a show called The Doctors, and my client at the time, Dr. Andrew Orden, was then asked to be one of the hosts of The Doctors. So I became involved with folks in the medical space about 16, 17 years ago when Dr. Phil's son, Jay McGraw, created the show The Doctors, and was part of that journey from the day that it premiered all the way through I think it was 14 seasons of the show, which aired every day. I became really close to not only Dr. Orden, but all of the doctors on the show, at one point representing, I think, all of the hosts at some point in time, and many of the guest doctors that then came onto the show because they had no idea and were unfamiliar with what is it like to be on a show, how can I benefit, how can this help my practice. And so through my work with Dr. Phil's production company and the show, I really expanded in this whole area of working with medical experts, which I still work with to this day, and now work with taking those doctors and new doctors and attaching them to brands and opportunities with corporations that are trying to seek to partner doctors with in their respective ad campaigns, or who are looking for advisory board placement, things like that.
So cool. And I think you told me that you are the only agency out there that has this medical division, right?
Yeah, I don't know anyone else that does it, right? It's so specific. There's a lot of agencies that have specialties. Some people will specialize in, dancers or in athletes. I don't know of anyone that specializes in medical experts. And so yeah, so I've taken it upon myself to formalize that into a department. So companies will come to me, production companies will come to me, and they'll say, "Listen, we're looking for someone. Can you help us find that right person?"
So awesome. And just to clarify for listeners, do you work only with physicians and doctors, or do you work with dietitians, physical therapists, other specialties as well?
Yeah, we're open to really anyone in the medical space, right? So dietitians are popular. Brands generally want a doctor, right? So we always try to go to the doctors first, but depending on what the situation is we'll definitely open that up to dietitians. It's what the market wants right now, or excuse me, yeah, what the market really wants.
Yeah.
So we're at the mercy of what's being asked of us, but we are always open to bringing talent into our under our tent for consideration for those opportunities.
Awesome. And let's talk about what those opportunities look like. 'Cause I know like the when you and I first talked, I was a little blown away by some of the numbers that you told me for, for commercials and things like that that honestly we don't really do much of in Master the Media because, that's kind of in your terrain. You're out there in Los Angeles and where
Mm.
all of this is happening.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I will tell you where I see the most activity is in the spokesperson space. So right now on TV, I have a relationship with Procter and Gamble, and they have a lot of products under their umbrella. So they will come to me through their production partners, right? And they will ask for talent. So yeah, women's health doctors, gut doctors, orthopedic surgeons that are all aligned with brands with Procter and Gamble. I've supplement companies that will come to me, and whether it's I had a big relationship with Cunol for years. In fact, just that just came back around, and I just placed another person with Cunol, but I placed Dr. Travis Stork, who was the host of the Doctors, with Cunol, and that was a campaign that ran for 4 or 5 years. The
Wow.
brand was sold, and now if you watch TV, you probably see the doctor, or excuse me, Tony Hawk, the skateboarder, is now the face of the Cunol brand that Dr. Stork was representing. But a lot of supplement companies. Um, that's been probably the biggest area where companies are trying to differentiate themselves from their competition is using medical experts.
So cool. So, like, is it safe to say the main things that you do is getting doctors hired for television shows and also for commercials?
Yes, I would say television shows less, right? Because a television show like a guest appearance on a morning show, that's really PR, right? I don't handle PR, so it's really important that people understand that we're not looking to create a media opportunity for the doctor. We're actually looking to place that doctor in some form of partnership with a brand on on a more permanent basis. However, companies do come to me and say, "Listen, we're launching a new product. We're looking for a doctor that will to be available for media interviews, um, and with the idea that they're looking to build something greater, right? We do a lot of digital content for those companies. I'm doing something right now with a company that specializes in nutrition for babies and
Oh,
infants.
fun.
And so they really wanted a doctor who could speak to um, children, so a pediatrician who is also a parent, right? So then we're doing a series of sit down interviews with her that will then be uploaded to their website, their social media, with the idea that they're rolling out a more of a formal campaign in 2027.
So awesome.
Yeah.
And I mean, so let's talk about like I think the elephant in the room is,
Yep.
and to be fair, like in Master the Media, a huge part
Yep.
of what we teach is you as a healthcare professional, like we will teach you how to find opportunities for yourself, how
Yep.
to book your opportunities as a spokesperson, and make a lot of money, like make $50,000 plus doing that.
Yep.
But the reason I brought you on is because we can't do everything. And I don't personally, we don't have connections to a lot of production companies that, produce these commercials. And so that's really why I was we were kind of introduced in a really roundabout way. And I was really excited when Blair and I first started talking.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so here's what's interesting, and I'm sure a lot of doctors would appreciate that, or appreciate what I'm going to say, is that we all have so much access to information, but we don't know how to process that information correctly or how to use it, how it can be used to work to our benefit or actually could hurt us. And what I mean by that, just from a medical perspective, is I can be my own doctor now, or so I think, right? I can go online, I can go to WebMD. I'm going to find a million different opinions that are going to tell me a million different things about my ailments and tell me all these things that I can do to make myself feel better. Some of them are going to be really crazy. Some of them are going to be normal. But how do I weed through what is appropriate, right? So that's why we have a doctor. We have an expert um, that's going to help guide us, right, in our healthcare. And I think just like we could manage our own money if we wanted to, but are we the best ones to do that, or is it better to get a money manager that can guide us a little bit more, or a tax advisor, right? So the opportunities are out there. It's my job. I always look at my job as twofold. My job is to either find opportunities for doctors or to take opportunities that they have found themselves, because let's face it, we're all available on our phones. Being available is not hard. Having a brand reach out to a doctor is not difficult. But then how do you sift through? How do you know what's appropriate? How do you know what's not appropriate? How do you know what is standard? What is something that um, might be inappropriate that they're asking for? What's the dollars? What's the dollars for my category? What is being asked of me? What are liabilities? How do I protect myself? Um, from an insurance standpoint, right? So my job is to either introduce you to an opportunity that you might not know exists, or take the opportunity that you have in front of you and maximize it, right? How do I make it better? How do I tighten it? How do I make sure you're protected? Um, Both, like I said, from a liability standpoint or financially as well.
So, talk us through like what it would look like, if one of our doctors was like, "Hey Blair, like can you help me? Let's go down the two different paths." Like
Sure.
they don't have any opportunities and they want to be connected with, with one of your opportunities, say a commercial, and the other instance is they have an opportunity and they're just like stuck on how to get more money or, get a better deal.
Right, right, right. Okay, so the first thing is taking their first scenario, which is there's no opportunity there. So I'll give you an example, like when I work on Procter and Gamble for their projects, right? So they will reach out to me, their production team, and say, I'll give you an example of something that is on the air right now. They'll reach out and they reach out. It's a product called Nervive. It's all over TV. It's been all over TV for a year. It's a retired doctor by the name of Dr. Sam Ruggiero, excuse me. He's a retired doctor who actually has problems with his joints. And he takes the product. He loves the product. And so they did this whole camp. They came to me and said, we're looking for someone who can speak to this authentically, right? Who can speak from the heart. And I was able to introduce them to Dr. Sam, and Sam went out, met with them. We did some meetings through Zoom. He met with the production company, the producer first. They had a conversation. The producer helped curate an audition, worked with him to put himself on tape that was then sent to the folks at Procter& Gamble. Because when you're dealing with a big company like P&G, there's a lot of layers of approval that have to take place. And then they took that content that the producer was able to kind of help curate with the talent, send it up the chain. He got approved and was then hired. So then they came to me and said, now we want to use him. What does the deal look like? Now I will tell you without getting too far into the weeds here, the original offer that came to him was very nice, and he was willing to work for that deal. We actually restructured the deal that is probably going to be 5 to 6 times greater than what he made.
Wow.
Right. So again, uh, sometimes what's laid out to you seems good until you start to go, well, do you understand that this is really how much we can really get for you and how we can structure this in a way that will benefit you in the long run? And it's worked out great. Procter and Gamble is happy with them. They're so happy with not only the new deal structure, which we shot a year ago last month, that they came back to us last fall. We shot more content with him, and everyone's happy. P&G is happy, the client is happy, and we were able to not only partner him with the brand, but then elevate what that deal would have looked like had we not been involved.
And can you give us an idea of, it doesn't have to be this specific deal, but like what kind of numbers are we talking about?
It really depends. So some of these companies, let's see, let's say a regular commercial, right? So a regular commercial. There's quite often a brand wants to just pay a flat amount and say, I want to write you a check for this amount, and that'll be it. And sometimes that works, right? In the case of Procter and Gamble, generally speaking, they are they are what is called a signatory to the Screen Actors Guild, which means that any deals that they do, they have to run through the union, right? So there's a structure in place based on how many times that commercial runs over a year that will determine how much the talent makes. I think generally when it comes to an endorsement that we see on TV, even digitally, we're seeing at least a minimum of $20,000. Now, that $20,000 is usually for one day's worth of work, and then the use of their image on television for a year. But I've seen those deals, if you've been on TV and you have media exposure, I've seen those deals go upwards of $600 to $600,000 for a year.
That's a very nice amount.
It is. Now, in all fairness, because I think it's important that people don't hear that number and think that's them. That's when I'm dealing with talent that have been on the doctors multiple times, right? They have exposure, they have some name recognition. The public is aware of them, but they can go in and shoot and make that kind of money. I have clients that have done back end deals, and what I mean by that is they get a piece of the sale of the product, right? So especially new companies. So if you have a new brand that comes to you and says, oh, I think you're so great, but I only can offer you $5,000 for your day. And then what we do is we structure a back end. Well, what if you sell enough of these products, these items, will you give the talent a piece of your back end, a royalty? And I've seen clients make $200,000 a year, $300,000 a year off a back end structure where they benefit from the sale. Because ultimately, the company wants to sell a lot of product. So if the product does really well, the talent's going to get paid. And if for some reason the product doesn't do well and they don't air the commercial, well, then no harm, no foul. The commercial never made it onto TV. And it may have only been out there for a few weeks. No one's really seen it. So they got paid for their day, but it's a risk, right? It's a risk to everyone. It's a risk to the medical expert that took the time to show up to do the work. But the upside is pretty fantastic. Yeah. Now, when we have a brand like a Procter and Gamble, they don't do that, right? Because they're fixed, they're big, they can afford to pay. So you're not going to get the likelihood that you're going to get some type of a back end royalty with a big brand is low. But when you have a new brand coming out, they're willing to take a risk, right? Because they need the talent, but they can't necessarily pay the talent immediately what they're worth. So we structure a back end deal where that when the brand does well, the doctor does well.
I mean, a $20,000 flat fee for showing up is pretty good. I'll take that.
It's good, but here's the thing that's interesting. So I just worked recently with a doctor, and we were trying to come up with a day rate, just not the use of her image, but just for her to show up on camera. And she said, "Listen, I make between $12,000 and $15,000 a day. I don't want to have to walk away from my practice, making less money than I can make just showing up to do my job." Right. So we also want to make sure that the expert gets paid at least what they're being paid to show up every day in their office environment, with the idea that there's some upside potential as well.
Yeah. So making sure the opportunity cost is taken care of.
That's right. That's right. And there's also, there's a risk, right? So there's a risk to a doctor who says, well, listen, I believe doctors in this space are always underpaid because these companies want to take this doctor, and again, we can be, whether it's a registered dietitian, they're taking their education and they're buying your education and your work experience and your expertise, and there's a value to that, and the value of a great when you have someone attached to your product that is highly credible, the results on the back end for the company is tremendous. So there is value to that, and I like people to get paid for that. I always say, Amy, there's and you're probably too young for this, but there was an old adage on TV where they would say, Well, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV, right? That used to be kind of a thing. And now they actually get real doctors. So you can hire real medical experts that will go onto television or participate in digital campaigns that are the real deal, that can speak from practical experience. But that experience comes at the cost of all the work they've done beforehand to get to that place.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what we're always telling our community is, your because I think it's like even just walking in the door and saying like, you're getting paid. I was just talking to a physical therapist and we were talking about her doing work at a conference for a brand and
Yep.
she was telling me she had gotten paid, a few $1,000s for a few days of work and I was like gently, like minimum like your day rate at a conference for 8 hours is $4,000, because of all of your years of experience and your expertise and your credentials. And I think it sometimes feels uncomfortable to ask for that amount of money. And that's
Well, and you know what? It's interesting because you hit on something that I always say is another reason why you need an agent. And I'm going to use myself as an example. So when I go to buy a car for me and I step onto that lot, right? It becomes there's a lot of emotion behind it, even for me, right? And I'm a negotiator. So when I'm negotiating for myself, I actually have to do my negotiation separately in my head before I show up, or I have to do it through email or a phone call, because once I physically step into that space where I'm engaging with someone and I like them, they like me, we're getting along, I see the car, it's got that new car smell, and I want it, the our emotions start taking over, then they step in the way of our ability to be really reasonable. And sometimes you have to say no, right? It's rare. I don't know anyone, and I've been guilty of this, which is why I had to change my behavior. I don't really show up in a car lot to buy a new car and not drive off in a new car. This is what happens. That's what we do. So the more I can take away that emotionality of the process, um, the more I end up benefiting in the long run. That's the same with talent, whether you're a medical expert or actors do this all the time, is they get excited about something. Oh, I want to work with this person. There's some excitement around it. Or in the case of just a doctor who says, I just want to be on TV. Well, that excitement over that doesn't, you can be excited about that, but don't let it come at the cost of the value of what you're bringing to the process, right? Because these brands are very well aware of the value that the doctors bring, but the doctors get really excited and they don't know. They don't know, like, is this reasonable? Is this not reasonable? What's the value here? So my job is to, I don't want to say play bad cop, but it's to create a sense of reasonableness to the process and help them understand it, so that if a doctor is presented with an offer, like you say, you show up at a conference and they're being asked to do something for $1,500 a day. And I'm like, we talk through it and we talk about, does this really make sense? And those companies will dangle a lot of carrots in front of the talent. And I have seen talent accept deals based on those carrots than what is real. The idea of what could be versus what is, right? So we negotiate on what is being presented, what is the offer, what is being asked of you, how are they going to use your image, and what is that opportunity cost for you? Because if it's just a wash, does it make sense for them to do it? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I
You
know
know what
for me, like anytime I'm asked to be away from home, like I have to take into account I'm hiring extra childcare. There's going to be more takeout because, I don't want to
I
leave
mean?
my husband doing all the
Right.
cooking.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
just a lot of extra, costs when you have when you're stepping away from your
For
typical
sure.
role. I have to hire instructors to take over my coaching, so it's
Yep.
not just a, sure, I want to get paid for a day. It's like, well, I have to cover those costs and I have to make profit.
Right. Right. And I also believe that currency comes in many forms. One of them is a dollar amount. One of them is the check you receive. One of them could be in building a relationship. One of them could be, you know, um, the exposure. You may go to a conference, and the exposure you get to provide more services. There might be cost benefit for you to do it, right? So we talk about currency in all forms instead of, contracts. When I do a contract for an endorsement, sometimes they're 10, 11, 12 pages long. The actual compensation part of that contract is a paragraph. And it's pages and pages of other things that we have to look at, right? And manage through that. Because quite often what people want to know is how much am I going to make? But it's all those other things. There's a lot of levers that can be pulled in those contracts. And sometimes you can't move the money lever. Sometimes the money lever is what it is, but we can move the other levers, right? So that's my job, is to look at all those levers.
Can you give some examples of what you mean by, adjusting other variables?
Sure. So an example would be how you can use a talent's image. So if someone comes and says, I will tell you, I had this happen this morning through a client of mine who's not a medical expert, who is now living on the East Coast. I have been dear friends with him forever, and he has an agent on the East Coast. And he was invited to shoot a TV commercial. And then he got the contract, and then the commercial turned from one commercial to 3 commercials. And then they wanted him not just to be on digital, on the internet, but they wanted an option to now put it on television. And so those are levers, right? Those are all different things. So if they want those items, that's fine, but then we have to move up the value lever and ask for more money, which is what I recommended. Or if their money lever is specific and we can't move it, then we have to, then I recommended we pull back on some of those other levers. Now, he has an agent on the East Coast, but he just wanted my opinion. So I said I would do this, I would do this. So, sometimes if something's more is being asked of you, you get to ask for more money. Or if what is being asked is way too much based on the dollar, then we have to bring that in. If you only have X dollars, if it's a conference and all you have is a total budget of $3,500, that's great. That might be one day. That's not the 3 days that you asked for, right? That's a one day. Sometimes it's you want to use this content and you want to pay a certain dollar amount, and that dollar amount you want to use it for 2 years. Dollar amounts, if it's not movable, maybe we say it's only good for 6 months. And after 6 months, we get to renegotiate. So we're moving time, we're moving how it's used, we're moving the length or time that the talent services are being requested. 1 day, 3 days, 5 days worth of work. How long, as you said, how long are you away from home? How long are you away from your family? So those are all levers we look at, as well as restrictions that they might put on you to do work for other people.
Yes.
Because, right. So if you're being asked to represent a brand that deals with, a painkiller, well, they're not going to want you if you're selling Tylenol. Tylenol doesn't want you to be selling aspirin. They don't want to be selling Aleve. So they're going to put restrictions around your work, right? So the other thing is managing the restrictions of what is reasonable, what is not reasonable. In my work with Procter & Gamble, some of their restrictions that they wanted were greater and extended beyond the scope of that particular product category. They wanted these doctors to be more exclusive to them in a broader sense. So by asking that, we were then able to ask for adjustments to the compensation based on that request.
Yeah. I mean, if
They
you
granted them
with
to us.
any other supplement versus, just brain health supplements, that's a big difference.
Right. That's right. Some things are, if we talk about, I'm trying to think of any. Let's talk about pain relief, for example, right? So some pain relief comes in the form of a pill. Some pain relief comes in the form of a lotion that you might put on the skin. So even something like that, where we determine, well, this mode of getting it into your system is going to be different than this, right? And is it possible that the person could still take let's say Tylenol, and then also still put aspirin on their shoulder. Well, that may
Huh.
not be a conflict. So let's keep that out of the exclusivity so that doctors that have specialties, their ability to represent brands is also really as specific as their area of expertise. So we have to keep those things very, very as narrow as possible while still being reasonable. Um, because we still want to keep as many of those other opportunities open and accessible to them as we can.
Absolutely. I mean, I always give the example of, I have worked with 2 different probiotic companies at the same time. One was specialized to help regulate blood sugar control, and one was a women's health specific probiotic. And
Right.
the deliverables were completely different. I was doing a webinar for one brand, I was creating forward-facing social media content for the other, and they both knew about each other and they both agreed like that's fine.
Yep.
But it's all case by case, right?
Right. Right. And also, sometimes what I try to do, and it doesn't always work, but I would rather have a doctor in a campaign that could stand behind the efficacy of the ingredients than the product name itself. So if you're dealing with a supplement, for example, and it's a combination. Let's say there's, I don't know, now I'm going to get in over my skis here, but let's say it's magnesium and it's got with zinc. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just making it up, right? So to have and we'll call that brand, you know, best supplement instead of the doctor holding up this product going, the best supplement, buy this. I'd rather have the doctor say magnesium is really good with this and zinc is really good with this, and speak to the benefits of the ingredients than feel as though they're pitching a product. It's still an endorsement.
Yeah.
And quite often I can get the brands to understand that really what you want for a doctor is not to be the salesperson, but to really validate the clinical studies, the claims, the ingredients, the quality of the ingredients, how they're sourced, the combination. That's what makes them experts. And that's beyond our pay grade. Anyone can say, this worked for me, or this is really wonderful, but to have them speak to the ingredients, for example, is something I try to redirect those brands to that area, if that
Yeah,
makes
I
sense.
think that's smart. And
And,
is
and
it
by the way, Amy, when you were talking about probiotics, right? So to have even a doctor or a registered dietitian says these are all good, it doesn't. A rising tide kind of lifts all boats. So if you're on this podcast talking about the benefits of probiotics, and this other company recognizes that all you're doing is speaking the truth about the space, it does help everyone,
absolutely.
right?
And
Instead
I
of saying
mean, and
this is
that's
the best.
yeah, that's the because I've had a lot of things happen where, a brand will be kind of, because there's different types of exclusivity, right? There's like, okay, you can't get paid by another probiotic. And then sometimes a brand will try and say, you can't mention another probiotic in the media. And I always say, like, I've literally turned down $60,000 contracts for this reason, because the reason that people respect my opinion in the media is because I'm giving my actual opinion. And so if like I want to be able to go and talk about like, okay, maybe this women's health probiotic is paying me. But I also think that if you're a man, well, I'm going to recommend this probiotic that's not paying me. And if you're a child, I'm going to recommend this one. And I want to be able to say all of those things.
Of course, of course. Yeah, it's important, especially to allow experts, in this case, medical experts, to speak freely, especially in the media. You don't want restrictions, right? Um, but again, it never serves anyone if I'm on TV selling Coca-Cola, here's Coca-Cola, and then I'm selling Pepsi. This is the best. That makes me look, I lose my credibility, right? But if I can just say, soft drinks are good for you. Then it doesn't matter if it's Coke or Pepsi. By the way, we know that's not true. Um, but if you can speak to the truth about what it is overall, then and it can apply to anyone, then that's a little bit better, right?
Absolutely.
So I think we're both saying the same thing there for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what it would look like to work with you when someone's like, "Hey, Blair, I have this contract and I don't know if I feel comfortable negotiating this, or I don't know if these numbers look fair to me or not. This brand's offering me $7,000 for, going on TV for them. I don't know if that's good or not.
Sure, sure. So first of all, I don't ever enter into any of those conversations with I'll call them outside talent, with the understanding that I'm automatically going to get paid on it. If I don't make a deal better or can't provide some comfort or relief to the talent, I don't want to be involved. And what I mean by that is if you call me up and you say, Blair, they just gave me this contract, and I look at it and I go, oh my gosh, this, I don't like this, I don't like, and we talk through it and help you understand that. And you go back to them, or you have me go back as your mouthpiece and say, can we do this? If they say, absolutely not, take it or leave it, we're leaving it just like this, and I wasn't able to make that contract better, I'm never gonna, that's how I get paid. I get paid to make contracts better or to bring new deals. So if I can't make that contract better, I'm not going to take it. I don't get paid. So that's important, because we never want talent to think, oh, I'm just losing money by hiring an agent. They think that a lot. Oh, I'm just going to have to, it's just going to cost me a commission. So if we can't improve a deal, I think that's really important
That's
too.
reassuring.
Yeah. So usually what we do is I'll take we start out with a conversation. I find out what you've actually already agreed to, because if you as a medical professional have already agreed to something, I can't take back something you've agreed to. If you've already said, yeah, I'll show up at your conference on whatever for 5 days, then I'll fly coach class and I'll do it for $1,500 a day, and you've done all that, and then you hand me a contract that outlines everything you've already agreed to, I can't do anything with that. There's nothing I can do with that, because you have agreed. And it's important that you maintain your credibility as a medical professional in the eyes of the person hiring you, than for us to do a bait and switch and suddenly go, nope, it's really got to be this. So I always say the first thing you can do is you can ask for an offer. Just ask for an offer. Can you give me an outline of what you're thinking? And it's also okay to say, listen, I have some folks I'd like to run this by and get their opinions. So if you can put something in writing, I'd love to just, I have Blair that looks out for me. Amy looks out for me. I'd like to run this by them. Legitimate brands are completely okay with you doing that. Legitimate brands have marketing teams, they have legal departments, they have whole teams of people behind them. So if you say, listen, this is a little outside of my scope, I just want to run this by, I have someone that kind of helps me with this, they're usually really okay with that. And in many cases, those companies will actually turn to me and say, can you even help us draft a contract? Because sometimes they want to hire the talent and everyone's kind of on the same page, and they don't even have anyone that can even do the contract. So that's something that I can actually help put together. Is I've done thousands and thousands I have so many examples of contracts that work, that I think are fair contracts, that I'm able to pull those out and use those. So that's the service that we also provide, is putting together a contract. We also help you understand what all the terms of that contract are, and understanding what is real and what's not real. And I'll give you a really great example of that is indemnification language in a contract, and understanding really what indemnification is, how you're really not protected. People are like, what? But it says I'm indemnified. And there's certain steps you can do to really tighten that language to protect you, especially as a doctor, especially if you are representing a product where people are taking and ingesting that into their body, or they're wiping it all over their body, and we're going, oh my gosh, I promise you, there is someone out there, if you say, take this little tablet, someone is going to come back and say, that made me sick, or I had some adverse reaction to that. And so what protection is in place? What steps are set up if that happens? What's the company doing? What's your response to be? Where's their protection? Real protection, not indemnification, where a company says, I'll indemnify you, right? So we work through that. I think I got a little off track, Amy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, actually, I want to ask a follow-up question anyway. I feel like
Yeah,
this is the beauty of podcasts, is you can just jump
yeah,
around. And,
just
um,
free flow, right?
yeah, let's talk about those protections, because this is one of the biggest questions we get from our doctors, and it's, what kinds of protection should you have in place for your own, like, I can go out and purchase X to protect myself, and
Yeah.
then what types of protection should you ask the company to take on your behalf?
Right. Well, that's right. So if it's really interesting because doctors want to, I'll just use a script as an example. So a script comes to a doctor and the doctor gets approval over that script. Because first of all, we would never want the doctor to say anything that doesn't represent their truth. Ever, 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 ever. Don't ever do it. If anyone puts anything in front of you that doesn't represent your truth, you have to say no, period, full stop. But what if they give you a script that doesn't represent what you want to say, and you have a right to make a change to that script, right? And then what if you make the change because that represents your truth, and then the company is sued? So have you, as a consultant, because now you're not only being a spokesperson, but you're consulted because you've stepped outside the mouthpiece and you're consulting to them in terms of language that they should say in the context of their campaign. Do you have protection set up yourself as a consultant in terms of protection, right? So you definitely have to have insurance for yourself as a consultant. But what if someone ingests that tablet and they get sick and they say, oh my gosh, this thing happened to me as a result, I'll never walk again? And what protections are in place by the company and it's got to go beyond indemnification. And indemnification, I'll give you an example. Amy, I want to borrow your car. And I say to you, Amy, I want to borrow your car. If I get in an accident with your brand new G-Wagon Mercedes that costs $250,000 a year, or $250,000, if I get in an accident with that G-Wagon, I promise you I'll pay for the repairs. It's a promise. And then you're like, great, thanks. And I even write it down. I promise. And I give it to you. And then I take your car and I get in an accident and I destroy your G-Wagon. And you come to me and you go, pay up, pay up. And I'm like, I don't have the money. And you're like, but you wrote it on a piece of paper. I'm like, it doesn't matter, right? So that's an indemnification. An indemnification is my promise to you. It doesn't mean anything because you don't know if I have the money to support my promise. Insurance is the gap. Insurance is what actually protects you. So then you'd be like, Blair, I trust that you'll pay me, but do you have an insurance policy that protects me? And I'm like, absolutely. And I show you my insurance. I show it to you because that's important. And I then borrow your car. I wrap it around a pole because I spilled hot coffee in my lap. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, Amy, I destroyed your car. I'm so sorry. And you're like, it's okay. You have insurance. The insurance company will pay for this, right? That's the difference, right? So indemnification is a promise. Insurance is the action behind the promise. And quite often what you see is a promise, right? So that's a big example. And not only do we want to get the insurance, I want a copy of that insurance. I want to see it. I want to see your name on it as the medical expert. So if I get insurance coverage statements once a week from a brand that says, here's proof of coverage that you are insured and you are protected, that if someone takes this product, the liability of their use of a product, you are protected, so they cannot come after you. So that would be an example,
Yeah,
right?
that's really
Another example of some protection is, and it rarely is an issue, but it happens. And by the way, these are all exceptions, right? So the likelihood I'm going to wrap your car around a tree is rare, right? The likelihood that someone's going to really have a problem with any of these things is rare. But you have to protect yourself in the unlikely event that it happens. Same with an obligation. So let's say I have a client that's going to be going up to Alaska in a couple months to do an event. So they're getting paid a substantial amount of money. I wanted some insurance that a week before they don't get cold feet. So I actually asked for deposits up front on appearances so that if that's canceled, my client who rearranged their office schedule and put off surgeries doesn't lose out. So there's also protection on time, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I think
so
that's
that would
really
be that would
important.
be another example. And
Yeah,
sometimes talent is uncomfortable asking for that, or what is reasonable, what is okay. Why it feels weird. They seem really nice. I know they're not going to cancel, but that's why you have someone like myself who gets to handle the business side of it, while the talent can just be the one talking about the topic at hand, which is maybe gut health. And that's all they have to do. They get to just be that person,
which is
right?
which is what they want to do anyway.
That's right.
Um, there's a question that I'm sure everyone's thinking at this point. So let me just ask it. You know, what percent does an agent keep of, say I get that commercial, I make 20,000, I make $20,000.
Yeah.
What part am I taking? What part are you taking?
Great question. So many jobs. So I'll take Procter and Gamble as an example. They pay the agency fee. I got them to pay it
Oh, that's
because as
beautiful.
part of the negotiation, I can ask them to do that, right?
So I still get the 20,000 and you
Right.
get your icing on a cake too.
Yeah, you'll still get the 20,000. That's not always the case. Um, that is always part of the negotiation, right? Normally, on a non-union job, the agent will receive 20% of the fee of the talent. Normally. Now, if you're getting $20,000, and this is really important, there's a couple of points here that I really want to make that people understand. If Procter and Gamble comes to you, Amy, and says, I want to hire you, we have 20,000, and you're like, okay, great. If I go to them and I say, Amy gets 20,000, but you must pay me my 20% on top, and we still work out your contract, so there's still some benefit there for you in terms of um, the talent sometimes will think, well, if I just don't use the talent, that's $24,000. I could make $4,000 more. It's actually paid completely separate, right? So the talent fee is paid to, this is what we ask. The talent fee is paid to you. The agency fee, which is disclosed inside of your contract, by the way, so everything is transparent, is paid to us. I get a check, the agency gets a check for 4,000, you get a check for your 20,000. If I was never in the equation, it's still 20,000. Okay? However, here's the thing that's important. However, sometimes they will come to us and say, we want to write one check. So whatever we agree to on an amount needs to include the talent fee. We will also disclose that to you. So if it's Procter and Gamble or another company, I'll just XYZ company, and they say, we just want it, our contract's only going to be with Amy, so she's got to pay you. We don't want to have to set up a separate vendor account for you. And sometimes there's some reasons internally they don't want to do it. Then what we'll do is we will then negotiate as best we can to include the bump of our fee into that final amount. So then I would come and I would say, Amy, we have a deal for you for $24,000. We're going to still make it a plus 20% deal. So it's still going to be 20% to you and $4,000 to the agency. They're just asking us to combine it in one amount. So we disclose that to you. In the case of a union job through Screen Actors Guild or AFTRA, it is standard that the agency fee is taken from the talent. It is not negotiated on top. And in the case of the union, Screen Actors Guild fees, that's a 10% fee. And the reason for the difference again, I'm going to get a little bit ahead of my skis, is that if you did a job using our $20,000 example, right? If it's a non-union job, it's $20,000 to Amy, the 20% on top for the agency. If it's a union job and you're like, well, I'm making 20%, but I have to give Blair 10, now suddenly I have to give him 2,000, so now I make 18. But what they also have to do, because it's a union job, is that they have to provide you 20% of benefit on top of the $20,000. So you get a pension that is set up in your name, you get a health contribution that is set up in your name. So that benefit is actually over 20%. You may not see it in your check, but if you do a deal for the Screen Actors Guild and you make $20,000, a pension is automatically set up for you, and you're going to now be getting a pension contribution that is going to be made by that company. Again, it doesn't show up in your check, but
That's
it's
really
recorded.
cool.
Right. Right. So it's a weird offset, and I work through that with people depending on the job because there's so many different ways it can go. I will tell you, I just had a job with a client not too long ago where the company said we will pay 10% on top, but the difference is going to come back from the talent. So the talent made, I can't remember what it was, $40,000. So, so normally it would be $40,000 plus 20%, which would have been an $8,000 commission. They said we'll pay, they actually had a budget of 45 and they said we'll pay 45,000. The 3,000 difference came from the client. We asked her that up front. We said, listen, the original offer, by the way, was 20. We got it to 40, but they want us to back out 3. So instead of the original offer of 20, you're going to put 37 in your pocket. And she's like, sold, totally fine. So that conversation happens up front. So you're very, very well aware of how we're paid.
I like the transparency.
Right. Yeah. Because here's the thing. Um, I don't work for free. I'll be really clear. I expect to get paid, right?
Nobody
But
work for free.
for sure, for sure. But as I said, if you came to me, Amy, if you called me up and said, hey, I have this contract and I can't make it better and show you the value that we bring, you're not going to pay me a dime. And they're not going, no one's going to, I get nothing out of it, right? And sometimes we look at contracts and we're like, there's nothing I can do here. It kind of is what it is. And we leave it and we hand it back and we say, it's all yours. Now, sometimes the talent will say, I don't want to deal with the invoicing and following up and the renegotiations. I don't want to deal with any of that. Can you still do this? And can they run everything through you? Because I'm not going to clean up a contract. I'm not going to do contract cleanup and everything without getting paid. But if I look at something and I say, this is it, like, you know, but it's all a conversation. It's all a conversation. I feel very, very strongly that the value that we add far outweighs. If I didn't, I wouldn't be doing this for 28 years.
Of course.
Right? So it works. But some people have a hard time getting over that hump because they don't always see that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we talked it through because that is like one of the biggest hangups I see about, considering, because there's the people who I think your best bet is to work with us and master the media. And then there's people who I think, we're having this conversation with you, Blair, because there's
Yeah,
people who it makes the most sense for them to work with an agent. And
right.
it's
For
not one
sure.
size fits
And
all.
and the other thing is they don't know what's reasonable. So someone comes to them again, well, let's just talk about an appearance, right? And as you said, hey, this is probably worth closer to $4,000 a day. If I go to you and you're getting $1,500 a day, and they want you, let's say, for 3 days, right? And so that ends up being $4,500 they're going to make. Or I say, listen, that's worth $4,000 or $5,000 a day. We're going to get it to 15, but you got to pay me the commission because I'm not going to pay the commission. And the net to you now is, what is that? 13,500 versus 3,500. Like if you can't see the net and what goes in your pocket, that becomes the bottom line.
Yeah.
All the minutia of, well, how do you get this and that? Um, it's nothing we're ashamed of or we hide, but we want to show you what's the net benefit when all is said and done.
Yeah, if you're walking away with more money in your pocket, that's a big deal.
Or because remember, I think currency takes many forms. Or if I'm able to take, because I think this is valuable. If the contract is, let's say again, $20,000, they're not going to pay the agency fee at all. They just say, Amy, if you want an agent involved, you got to pay it. But that deal was for 2 years or 3 years, and I come in and I make it a 1 year deal. Even though the money is the same, where the value lies is that a year from then, I get to go ask them for more money. And suddenly you may have taken $20,000 for 3 years, but if that spot or that campaign continues, I'm into year two with this Nervive product, right? So if it continues, then we get to go back and ask for more money. And if it did 20,000 worth in year one, and we get to be involved in the year two negotiation, and I ask for $30,000 or $40,000, suddenly you don't have $20,000 in your pocket. You've made $58,000 or $60,000 in your pocket. So again, those are all the levers that we try to move to your advantage.
I love that.
And listen, as an agent, we want the best deal for you, because the best deal means it gives you the most opportunity to make the most amount of money while still protecting you, because that's important. And when you make more money, I get to make more money. So it's always about elevating that. And how do we
Everyone's
make that?
happy.
Yeah, I want to make you the most money as I can, or structure the deal to make it most advantageous for you. Because sometimes I want to say in the short run, the money might feel the same, but in the long run, and if you're willing to look beyond the first year, the opportunity increases tremendously, right?
I love that picture you just painted. Um, so if you had like one more, gem of advice to give listeners before we sign off, what would that be?
Here's the thing, I think it's really important, is you have to, and this is where I would not want you to waste your time as a medical expert. Not everyone is good on camera. I think I would be terrible on camera. I think I'm good in this environment,
I actually
but I
think
think
you'd be
if
good, but that's
but I
that's
think if
my
you put a camera in front of me and said, now say this thing and do this thing, I think I would fall apart. I've been on sets. I will tell you, I've been on sets with doctors. It's not often where a brand has found their doctor because they've hired their own doctor, because quite honestly, they may have $2,500 or something really small, and they didn't want to pay to bring on an experienced doctor who has media savvy, because media training is vitally important. It is a skill outside of the expertise. Being able to deliver the content correctly and with confidence is really important, right? So I've been on sets where they bring on a doctor who in the course of a conversation prior to the shoot, they were fine putting them in a chair, putting makeup on them, putting lights around them, 20 sets of eyeballs looking at them, cameras rolling, and they break down. They can't do it. They can't do it. So you got to know that it's a different skill set, and that the more media training you can get, the more media experience you can get will help you. This is where, when I talk about currency, appearing on a morning show, for example, and Amy, I think you help folks with this.
Yeah.
You do a local morning show, you may not get paid for it, but that's currency, because then I, as an agent, can say, well, Dr. Amy, she's done the morning show for her local Fox affiliate, and she's comfortable. She did great. And by the way, I have a little clip of her here doing it, right? So that's currency, because that little bit of experience with you on camera creates comfort in the next person that's looking to hire you.
Absolutely.
So the piece of advice that I have is that the media training is purposeful. It's important, and it really helps those who listen. When a brand has 5 gut health doctors to choose from. If 2 of them have never done media or have not had media training, the likelihood that they're going to be invited to participate is going to be pretty low.
Yeah, I think that is really important. And Master of the Media, we actually have our broadcast instructor, Alicia Quarles. She's won an Emmy. She's been on Good Morning America 3. She has her own TV show. And
Mhm.
she actually works with our students to give feedback to their on-camera presence even before they do that first local TV segment. And
Yeah.
then from there, like you said, then you have your clips to say, like, here is what I'm like on camera.
Yeah, it's important. It shows because no one's going to question your CV when you say, "Listen, I went to Stanford and did this, and I have all this great experience, and I can speak to this topic very confidently." Um, they don't question that. They question how are you going to do in the environment that they put you in, which is an environment that's different than what the doctors are used to.
Oh,
They're not in
absolutely.
offices with their patients one-on-one, right?
I
It's a
mean,
very
I know it took a good amount of media training for me to be comfortable with going on TV, but I was thrown into it like pretty much overnight. Like tomorrow you're going to be on national TV. So
yeah, 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 and
uh,
it's that would be my
yeah,
biggest piece of advice, right? Because there's a lot of doctors, there's a lot of medical experts, but creating that advantage is really important. I will tell you, even for us as an agency, we don't say yes to every doctor just because you're a doctor, right? We say yes because you have shown some ability to invest in that part of this business, which is the either having the experience or having the training.
I love that. I think that's so important. Where can people find you, Blair?
All right. So I will give you my email address.
Okay.
First of all, my website is taylortalentservices.com. And my website, excuse me, my email is Blair, Blair, at Taylor, Taylor, talentservices.com.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much, Blair. This has been so
absolutely.
informative. I'm sure listeners are just have so much to think about now. And
Great.
for anyone listening who wants to learn more about what you can earn working with brands, check out our free pricing guide at masterthemedia.co/pricing.